Hey guys, Scarlett here. So for my returning subscribers, welcome back, and for anyone new here, welcome. I post weekly videos about topics like tarot, paganism, and magic. And today we have a fun and perhaps controversial subject, we'll see. And this is about witches and if witches believe in the devil. And I wanted to make this video because this is something you're going to run into if you are a practicing witch, or if you are even a pagan or a Wiccan. People are gonna be concerned. People might come up to you and be like, oh, that's devil worship, you know, things like that. And I wanted to give you guys a bit more of a perspective and tap into that history a little bit in order to answer this question. And at first glance, right away, I'm going to say that the short answer to this question is no. Witches do not believe in the devil because the devil is a Christianized concept. However, that is the short answer, and it doesn't necessarily fit all aspects of the story. So we're going to add in a bit more context and a bit more complexity here. So the first thing you need to consider is, what is witchcraft, right? Because if a witch is someone who practices witchcraft, then witchcraft is something you do. It's not necessarily religious or spiritual, though it can be. But for the most part, witchcraft consists of doing something like a spell or a ritual, or even learning the wisdom of herbology and things like that. You can think of it as, well, if that's the case and witchcraft is something you do, it's not necessarily religious, then of course witches don't believe in the devil, because again, that is an entity coming from a religion. So that is kind of not really relevant. However, there are many people who practice witchcraft in combination with a certain spiritual practice. Wicca is a good example of this. Wicca is considered to be a religion that does include witchcraft as part of it. However, not all Wiccans do practice witchcraft, but many Wiccans do. So that is a religious or spiritual structure that does include witchcraft within its practice. So, in order to think about this question, we need to think about the figure of the devil and where that idea comes from. So we all know that Christianity converted Europe from paganism. And within paganism, there were a number of male deities from a variety of different pantheons. So one of those deities might be Pan from the Greek pantheon. Another one might be Cernunnos from the Celtic pantheon. And these two deities I wanted to talk about in particular because they kind of represent the wild masculine energy, and even the wild energy of the forest and the animals in nature. And they're also in part tied to male fertility and sexuality. So these two figures here represent our own human sexuality to a certain degree. Those who are familiar with Greek mythology know that Pan is never too far away from those nymphs. So you have a group of peoples from all over Europe in various different pantheons who are celebrating certain concepts. One of those concepts being human sexuality, and don't necessarily view that as morally wrong in the same way that a Christianized concept would. And that's a big difference with the Abrahamic religions. In the Abrahamic religions, things tend to be a bit more binary. So you have good versus evil, you have God and the devil, light and dark. In pagan societies, things were a bit more gray. You know, the deities, the gods and the goddesses weren't perfect beings. They were like us in a lot of ways. They did good things and did bad things. And the pagan worldview didn't really look at things in that binary structure. And in part, that's, in my view, because pagan religions were inspired by nature and the harvest and the agricultural season. So in nature and in hunting and things like that, you can't view nature as good or bad. is a deer good because it eats leaves, and is a mountain lion bad because it kills? No, that just doesn't make any sense. So likewise, with humans, our own nature is complex. It is shades of gray, right? It's not binary. Nature is not good nor evil. And part of paganism is embracing that and working with that concept. But this caused a big issue when Christianity came in part because you have these deities that are celebrating both kind of this wild, frenetic, masculine energy of the hunt. That was something that was very much celebrated. And also the nature of male sexuality. And that was something that in the church viewpoint was sinful. So what it did is it took certain deities that were closely tied to that male sexuality, like Pan, for example, and took those visible characteristics of Pan and then turned them into a dark entity, which we now view as the devil. So you'll notice a lot of the devil's appearance, him being a satyr in a lot of ways, is in part inspired by these pagan deities that the church wanted to transition from being kind of positive, sexual, vibrant, gray characters, not good or evil, and transition that into something sinful. So now you have the question, if people are celebrating the spirit of Pan, are they worshiping the devil? So I would say most likely not. But you could make the case that those same energies that are connected to the devil, that sexuality component, that wild, unknown, kind of dark nature of it, yeah, I mean, people do still connect with that in a spiritual sense. So that's why this question is more complex when you dig a little bit deeper. I would say that in my view, the devil is much different than the concept of Satan. Satan's kind of this fire and brimstone hell creature. So I don't really think there's as much connection with any kind of pagan deities. I think that was pretty much just kind of a more Christian created concept. But the devil is definitely in part inspired by these pagan deities. And over time, you have, witchcraft developing, because after Europe converted to Christianity, that doesn't mean people gave up their spiritual lives and their pagan beliefs and traditions right away. So you did have women that still wanted to work with that energy, that darker energy of the wild, that darker energy of sexuality. So you have the concept of the witch's Sabbat, right, which people were so afraid of, which was really just women continuing the line of pagan connection with this energy. And women in pretty much the majority of pagan religions across the world have always been connected with intuitive and psychic abilities. So like the seer, right? You have the oracles, of course, like the Oracle of Delphi in the Greek world, but then you also have like the seer in the Norse world. So you traditionally would have these women all over the world who would oftentimes ingest psychedelic mushrooms and things like that, psychoactive substances, and go on these journeys in order to see or divine the future. So that's something that's always traditionally been associated with the feminine, the ability to connect with that unknown realm. So what you have is women who still want to participate in that practice, who do still also want to participate in many of the other older pagan customs and traditions. Well, yeah, a lot of them did go to the woods, put some flying ointment, which was a salve made out of psychedelic substances, on a broomstick, and had a good time. That did happen. That is the witch's Sabbat. Now, in my view, that's not something sinful. That's just women participating in a long line of the tradition of seeing, of tapping into that other world. Though from the Christian viewpoint, they're communing with the devil, right? Because they're communing with that darker aspect, that wild sexual nature of the forest. So you have to think about that when you are considering witchcraft as it transitioned into the Christian world and started to be called witchcraft. It didn't used to be that. It used to just be the pagan world and the pagan worldview. So you have this long continuous line of women specifically being connected with these practices, and these practices being viewed as sinful or connected to the devil by the Abrahamic traditions. I do want to mention that there is another side to this. So not all witches want to work with some of the more darker aspects of witchcraft, and some of them don't even work that much with the sacred masculine energy as well. One of those being Dianic Wicca, which prefers to work mostly with the sacred feminine. So again, keep in mind that there are always exceptions to every rule when it comes to something like paganism or witchcraft or Wicca, and there are many different ways to practice. So in kind of conclusion here, there really isn't a yes or a no answer I can give to this question. It all depends on your specific worldview. And that's, again, bringing it back to the pagan worldview versus the Abrahamic or even the Christian worldview binary. So, you know, in the pagan worldview, there isn't a good versus evil. There are all shades of nuance and gray. And it's just like nature, right? And that's why pagans revere nature. Some pagans might even worship, but not all pagans worship nature. So nature is such a huge component, and we base our own practices on the power of nature. And in nature, the things aren't good or bad, they just are. And you have to kind of develop a sense of comfort with that if you are going to go down a spiritual path that is inspired by paganism. So, you know, another thing with witchcraft is it can be used for both positive or malevolent purposes, right? Because everything's a spectrum here with witchcraft, there have been plenty of people that have used witchcraft to create harm on others. That has happened in the past. Most witches don't do that, but I'm not going to sit here and say that none do. I mean, some definitely do. Though there are plenty of people that wouldn't ever do anything like that, and they only want to work with the positive energies of the universe. So there is a lot of variety there. And with witches and witchcraft, there is no rule book, right? This isn't a religion that has a set of rules and morality standards. And witchcraft is something, in my view, and I think a lot of others' viewpoints as well, is something that exists naturally. It is not something that was invented and then controlled by a governing body. The power of witchcraft exists within the plants, it exists within the planets, with the moon, it exists within our own personal power and the power of others and groups. So this is something that is natural, and witches are just kind of tapping into this natural power. And in my viewpoint, the fact that there aren't necessarily rules, it's not necessarily black and white, is appealing to me. I like that because it fits more in with my own perceived view of nature, with my own perceived view of humanity as well. And I like as well that witchcraft leaves it up to you. I mean, how you choose to do witchcraft, what energies you choose to work with. If you choose to work with some of the darker energies that are represented by the Christianized concept of the devil, you can do that. There is no rule book. Or if you choose to just kind of work with the lighter energies and positive energies of light, you can definitely do that as well. Witchcraft respects your own sense of judgment and your own personal morality. You get to choose how you want to use your tools, how you want to direct your own spiritual practice. And that is a freedom that I find very appealing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Again, this is something that is very controversial, and no matter how much I talk about it, there's always going to be a contingent of people who immediately dismiss it all and say it's all evil. But I hope that by talking a bit about the history here and bringing a bit more context, you can have a bit more of a nuanced view of this difficult question. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments down below. And I do have a corresponding blog post on this as well, so I will link that in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.